supposed to be knowledgeable about interventions. I think I am. So I wanted to just hear about this intervention, which I hadn't heard about before, and learn more about it and see. And frankly, it was promising enough for us to decide that we'd like to work with Mike and Trish on this project. And so what I'd like to do is just tell you why we made that decision. What's the science of this, and why did it resonate positively with me? So if you'll forgive me, I will have to sit down and balance things. The first thing that we've now done, we have a first draft of a paper that Walter Gilliam, working with Amy Gagliardi, who's a fellow at our center, they've now prepared a comprehensive review which demonstrates the rocking chair intervention by family medicine physicians as a sound theoretical foundation based on numerous studies of early development, which have demonstrated the centrality of the mother and her behaviors in forging a secure attachment on the part of her infant. A secure attachment is a milestone event, and if it's not secure, there's problems. A secure attachment predicts all kinds of later positive characteristics in the child, such as good peer relations. Now, it also struck me that the rocking chair intervention is totally consonant with my field's greatest discovery in the past 25 years, namely the implications of the great plasticity and openness to experience of the developing brain during the first 3 years of life. We've learned that rather than being pre-programmed by our genes, very early experiences are involved in actually developing the physical architecture of the brain, with the more complex structures being built over the earlier, more simple structures. If one wants to know this literature, there's one really good book that I think is probably the best book on human development of the last quarter of a century, by Jack Shonkoff and Deborah Phillips, entitled From Neurons to Neighborhoods. I covered a less smaller swath of human development in my own book, talking about early brain development and its significance for social policy, which is entitled The First 3 Years and Beyond. Now this development, this recognition of this brain plasticity has not gone unnoticed by decision makers. The early brain research has made clear that delaying intervention for poor children to Head Start, starting at the age of 3, is waiting too long. As a result of this knowledge, I work with Senator Kennedy, with whom I've worked for many years. He's one of the great champions of children in this country. And Senator Kennedy took the lead in establishing our nation's early Head Start program, directed at both mothers and children from pregnancy through the 2nd year of life. One of the interesting findings, they've now done a random assignment outcome study of this early Head Start, and lo and behold, the earlier that you get in, particularly if you could get in during pregnancy or shortly thereafter, the earlier you get in with the child, the better is your outcomes of your program. The Nobel laureate, James Heckman, has confirmed the value of this very early approach to intervening with at-risk children. He has examined the cost-benefit analyses of interventions mounted at different ages for at-risk children. His clear conclusion was that the younger the child at the time of the intervention, the greater the payoff to the child's positive development and to the well-being of the larger society. It's very interesting. We now call it the Heckman curve. It goes like this. So if you get huge effects, if you start very young, and later you start, the less your benefits. Thus, the Rocking Chair Project is one of the earliest interventions I know anything about. I've now studied the development of children for over half a century, and with most other scholars in my field, I've come to the conclusion that human development is essentially the story of relationships. The first and most important being the relationship between parents and their children. The rocking chair intervention is a relatively inexpensive way for parents to develop a growth-inducing relationship with a very young child. There can be no relationship without real proximity in which the interactions are characterized by warmth and concern. That's the Rocking Chair Project. In addition to this, the rocking chair experience provides the child the all-important tactile stimulation that the child needs for optimal brain development. I can't overestimate the importance of tactile stimulation, which is often ignored. Further, this proximity promotes simply talking to the child, which generates early language ability and later literacy. The importance of talking to very young children is huge. Too many poor parents feel that talking to a baby is a waste of time. Thus, Hart and Risley, in their book, Meaningful Differences, have informed us that poor children, the type that this project is directed to, in the first 3 years of life, hear approximately 1/4 the number of words that a middle-class child hears. We see here the beginning of the large achievement gap at school entry between poor and middle-class children. And that's the whole purpose of No Child Left Behind. By 2014, we're to have no more achievement gap between poor and middle-class children. I doubt whether it's going to happen, but it's a very important goal to have, because the bad news is this: do your work early, because school entry is already late. You know, the child goes to kindergarten at 5, and believe it or not, these children that show this achievement gap, they don't get better with the school years. If anything, they fall further and further behind, all the way up to often just dropping out. And now we turn to something that's unnoticed, but was mentioned by Mike a minute ago, that impresses me about the chair intervention. A major benefit, as I see it, is the benefit that accrues to the family physician. I hate to break the news to you, but most physicians, in my own experience, have little understanding of the everyday life of poor families. Some poor kids make it into medicine, but they're few in number. These are usually middle-class people with that kind of background. Physicians who actually visit the home of poor families are educating themselves and are beginning to develop the empathy necessary for a sound doctor-patient relationship. Again, relationship. This relationship is enriched by the family physician actually getting on the floor, perhaps getting a little dirty, in order to assemble the rocker with the parent. Look at that picture. The mother and whole family unquestionably begin to view the physician in a more human and positive way. Parents across the economic continuum commonly complain that their physician does not answer the many questions they have. Much research has demonstrated this. This is a common complaint, not just among the poor. Further, the home visit permits the family physician to examine the environmental characteristics of the home, which we know from research on a scale we call the home scale, is an important determinant of the child's development. Remember, the parent not only has critical interactions with the child, but also determines the home environment. After doing a quick inventory of the home, the family physician is in a perfect position to make recommendations about improving the infant's home environment, as well as answering questions that the parent feels more comfortable raising in a friendly interaction in her own home. I'm going to leave you just with a final thought. We now have a fancy word that we use for a paradigm to understand children, which is Urie Bronfenbrenner, no longer with us. It's a frame of reference or a paradigm he developed called the ecological model, in which we discover that just about everything influences the development of the child. You know, the economic state, you know, things the family has no control over, policies here, there, and everywhere, state, federal. This is too big to grasp, so I've tried to take Urie's model. Urie and I were close friends, and distill it so we know where the action is and what we should emphasize in our interventions and our policy formulations. There's a lot of systems, as Urie pointed out, that influences the child, the media, what have you. But the four major systems, as far as I'm concerned, is first and by far the most important, to which this intervention is directed, is the family, particularly the parents and the mother. The second system, some of you are working on around the world, I spoken to earlier, and that's the health system. The health system. Look, if you can't keep the child alive through infancy, all the other systems become moot. It's rather embarrassing to live in the richest nation of the world and discover that we're about 20th in the world in regard to children's infant mortality, which of course is much higher among the poor, particularly the minority poor, about 2 to 1 compared to Caucasians. Thus, you know, as I look at this model that I've created out of Urie's, here's an intervention that hits 2 of these major systems. the parent and the medical system in the way of the family physician. Thus, after giving you my own rationale for becoming involved in the rocking chair project and pointing out why it makes so much sense to me, I'd certainly like to take this opportunity to congratulate Mike and Trish for this important effort, which is growing, and to announce that under the leadership of Walter Gilliam, our center at Yale will continue to work with the McGee's to assess the system, to help inform people about it, and to make it better known. And our first step will be to take this very first overarching paper in which we spell out the rationale, which has now been produced, to edit it and fine tune it so that we have a publishable document that would talk about the rocking chair intervention and put it into our general literature. Because people should know more about this model.
That's
Fabulous.
great.